The story starts on a sheep farm where a guy named Henry is helping his dad and their friend Tucker bring the sheep back to the barn. Everything seems peaceful, but things quickly take a dark turn. Henry's older brother, Angus, is watching from a distance, feeling bitter and jealous. He's stuck at home with a broken leg and resents that Henry is better at handling the farm. Out of spite, Angus does something awful. He targets Henry's favorite ram, Dudley. When Henry comes back to the barn later, he finds Dudley missing. Then, in a horrifying moment, he sees the remains of the ram falling from the barn roof, followed by Angus, wearing the poor animal's skin, trying to scare him. As if that wasn't traumatic enough, one of the farm workers, Mrs. Mack, suddenly arrives with terrible news. Their father has died in a motorcycle accident. Fast forward 15 years. Henry, now living in the city, returns to the farm after all that time. The place holds a lot of painful memories for him, and ever since what happened with Angus and the ram, he's developed a serious fear of sheep. At the same time, two animal rights activists, Experience and Grant, head to the same farm. They're convinced there's some shady animal experimentation happening there and want to investigate. When Henry gets to the farm, everything feels eerie and empty. Inside, he's startled when Mrs. Mack accidentally points a shotgun at him, thinking he's a trespasser. Realizing her mistake, she gives him a warm hug and catches up with him. Henry's real reason for visiting is to meet Angus, who wants to buy out Henry's share of the farm. Henry is unsure. It's the last thing he has that reminds him of their dad, but Angus offers cash up front and shows him to his office to seal the deal. Meanwhile, the activists sneak onto the property and discover the lab. They see a scientist, Dr. Rush, bringing in some strange containers. When no one's looking, Grant grabs one and takes off into the woods with Experience. After a while, they check the container and find a bizarre, genetically modified creature inside. They figure it's enough to expose the lab's dark secrets. But things go sideways fast. Dr. Rush and her team catch on and start chasing them. During the escape, Grant drops the container, which breaks open. A mutant sheep pops out and bites his ear. He fights it off, but it's too late. He's already infected and starting to feel weird. Back at the farm, Henry signs the sale papers and asks Angus what he's really planning. Angus claims he's working on a revolutionary agricultural project. Before Henry leaves, he visits Mrs. Mack one last time. She gives him their father's old shearing trophy as a keepsake and tells him that Tucker, Henry's childhood friend, is now the farm manager. Henry and Tucker reunite and head out to check on the sheep, unaware of what's about to unfold. Just as things seem to calm down, the mutant sheep shows up again and lures a nearby lamb with its strange cry. When the lamb gets close, the creature bites it. A little while later, Tucker takes Henry out in his truck, and they find that same lamb standing in the road, its snout clearly injured. Henry, still terrified of sheep, can't bring himself to approach it, so Tucker handles it and moves the lamb off the road. Just then, a woman, Experience, shows up and surprises them. Without them noticing, she grabs Tucker's rifle from the truck and points it at them, demanding to know where her friend Grant is. They have no idea who Grant is, but Henry says maybe his brother Angus can help. When she finds out Henry is related to the farm's owner, she flips out and threatens him. She doesn't even know how to use the gun properly, and when Tucker offers to help, he tricks her and grabs it back. Frustrated, Experience storms off to continue searching for Grant. Meanwhile, Grant is deep in the woods, behaving more and more erratically due to the infection. Though he's an animal lover, he ends up devouring a rabbit, clearly losing control. Back on the road, Tucker, Henry, and Experience cross paths again. She apologizes for earlier and explains that she broke into the farm to stop strange animal experiments. Henry's confused, but before they can talk more, Tucker sees smoke coming from a nearby house. They rush over and find a mess in the kitchen, and Mike, one of the farm workers, is missing. Instead, the injured lamb from before shows up again, now aggressive. The group hides and finds Mike dead, his throat torn out. The lamb breaks through the door, but Tucker manages to shoot it just in time. After that, they try to leave, only to find more sheep outside. They seem normal, but Henry still can't get near them. Experience helps calm him down, coaching him through his fear. It works, until an infected sheep suddenly attacks and jumps into their truck, going after Tucker. Henry and Experience climb into the back of the truck while Tucker speeds off. Henry tries to help with a chainsaw they've got in the truck bed, but the road's so rough he drops it. The sheep bites Tucker's leg before he finally kicks it off. The truck loses control and heads straight for a cliff, but the group, including their dog, jumps out just in time before it crashes into a lake. Shaken but alive, they know they need to get back to the farm and figure out what's really happening. Meanwhile, Grant continues to wander, visibly transforming. His teeth are changing, and he's growing white fur like a sheep. As he walks down the road, he runs into Angus. Angus gets out of his car, annoyed, but when he tries to approach, Grant bites his hand and runs off. Back with the group, Tucker starts feeling worse. When he checks his leg, he He's horrified to see that his foot has actually turned into a sheep's hoof. Things get worse fast. Tucker's infection is spreading. If they don't find a cure soon, he'll turn into some sort of sheep-human hybrid. But before they can figure out a plan, a whole herd of infected sheep shows up on a mountain and starts charging straight toward them. Tucker sends his dog back home and, despite his injured foot, runs with Henry and Experience. After a frantic escape, they find the secret lab and sneak inside, only to discover disturbing experiments and a sheep corpse hanging from the ceiling. That's when they run into Angus and Dr. Astard. Henry tries to warn them about the infection spreading, but Angus brushes it off, saying the sheep are just genetically modified for profit, and he's preparing to show them off to investors. Henry begs him to look at Tucker's foot to see the truth, but before they can prove anything, Dr. Astard sedates Tucker. Henry wants to help, but Tucker tells him and Experience to run. They do, right into another pack of crazed sheep that chases them toward a dumping pit full of animal remains. Angus shows up, but instead of helping, he leaves them to fend for themselves. With the sheep gaining on them, Henry and Experience fall down into the pit and crawl through a tunnel, hoping to find a way out. Experience lights a candle to lead the way, but when they get to a tight passage, she freezes. Turns out she's claustrophobic. Henry helps calm her down, just like she helped him earlier with his sheep phobia. She squeezes through, then pulls Henry out just as the sheep try to bite him. He manages to trap them in the tunnel and throws in the candle, setting them on fire. They make it out and take a moment to clean up in a stable until they hear something moving inside. Turns out it's Grant, but he's no longer fully human. The infection has transformed him into a terrifying sheep-human hybrid. Experience tries to reach out, hoping he'll remember her, but he attacks and throws Henry aside. The two barely escape and lock the monster inside. Now, Henry's terrified the same thing will happen to Tucker. Sure enough, back at the lab, Tucker starts transforming. His teeth change, and he's clearly becoming a hybrid. Dr. Astard watches, curious, and only injects the antidote after he fully changes. To her surprise, it works. Tucker returns to normal. Pleased, she takes a sample from him to replicate the cure. But the celebration doesn't last. When she steps outside, she finds one of her assistants being eaten by infected sheep. She tries to run, but gets stuck in the mud, and before she can escape, the sheep catch up and attack. Meanwhile, Angus is back at the farm, ready to impress investors with his twisted little science project. As Angus prepares to unveil his big project, he notices his reflection. His face is pale, and the bite on his hand is worsening, but he ignores it and steps on stage. He proudly introduces his breakthrough and reveals Oldfield, a fully lab-created sheep. The guests are intrigued, but Oldfield begins shrieking wildly, and suddenly, chaos erupts. A swarm of infected sheep crashes the event, mauling everyone in sight. Angus flees with Oldfield, and on the way, he encounters another infected sheep that curiously spares him. He looks down to see his hand has mutated into a sheep's hoof. It's clear now he's infected too, and the sheep recognize him as one of their own. At that moment, Henry and Experience arrive, just in time to see the carnage. Mrs. Mack picks them up in her car, and on the way back to the farm, the road is crawling with carnivorous sheep. Once home, they try calling for help, but the phone lines are dead. Suddenly, the mutated Grant bursts through the door and knocks Henry out. Desperate, Henry tries to grab a weapon, but it's Experience who saves him. She drives a stick through Grant's neck, stopping him. Their brief relief ends when more sheep surround the house. They barricade the doors and learn there's still a working phone in Angus's office. Henry rushes there and finds Angus hiding with Oldfield. Furious, Henry grabs his father's old rifle, ready to end it all, but Angus defends Oldfield, revealing he used his own DNA to create the sheep and is now becoming one of them. Henry nearly pulls the trigger, but in the end, walks away, grabbing his dad's old trophy instead. Rejoining the others, he sees the house is surrounded, and Angus, along with Oldfield, is fleeing to the airstrip. Henry realizes that if they escape, the infection will spread further. As he moves to stop them, he notices a bite on his arm. He's infected too. Fearing for their safety, he tells Experience and Mrs. Mack to leave. Touched by his bravery, Experience kisses him and begs him to return. Donning fur coats to blend in with the flock, Henry sneaks through the horde, using the trophy to part the sheep. Though they recognize him as infected and let him pass, his disguise is quickly blown. At the same time, Mrs. Mack and Experience decide to fight and ram their car into the crowd, blasting sheep with a shotgun. Meanwhile, at the hangar, Angus prepares to flee, but his body finally gives in to the infection. His teeth fall out, his hands become hooves, and his face begins to contort. As he screams in agony, Henry arrives and searches the warehouse, determined to confront his brother once and for all. Suddenly, Angus attacks Henry by surprise, pinning him against the wall in his terrifying new hybrid form. Henry pleads with his brother to remember who he is, saying things could have been different. They could have run the farm together, but Angus ignores him and continues the assault. Desperate, Henry uses the old trophy as a shield, hoping it might hold the creature back, but it's not enough. Angus's transformation completes, and he becomes even more monstrous. Henry tries to grab the rifle, but the hybrid knocks it away with a brutal strike and throws him across the room. Just then, Angus's plane, which had been circling on a runway, becomes part of Henry's last-ditch plan. Out of nowhere, Tucker's dog runs in barking, distracting the creature. Henry urges the dog to keep it up, buying precious seconds as the plane approaches from behind. The plan works. The propellers rip through the creature, ending the fight in a burst of gore. Exhausted, Henry notices his own arm is mutating from the infection. As he hesitates, Angus, still barely alive, lunges for one final attack, but Tucker arrives in a jeep and pours the antidote into his snout, then does the same for Henry. After a painful reaction, Henry recovers, fully cured. Tucker reveals he salvaged the antidote from the lab, and now they can begin reversing the infection. Angus, also reverted to human form, lies wounded on the ground. The group leaves him and reunites with Experience, explaining what happened. Together, they begin herding the infected sheep into the barn to administer the antidote, but they realize there isn't enough for all of them. That's when Angus reappears, still clinging to his plan to dominate the sheep. But now that he's no longer infected, the flock doesn't recognize him, and they devour him alive. As Angus is torn apart, Henry lights his lighter and tosses it into the barn, setting the infected sheep ablaze. By morning, Henry, Experience, and Tucker work together to cure the remaining hybrids, including Grant, who returns to normal but is haunted by the memory of his actions. In the end, Henry decides to stay and rebuild the family farm with his friends by his side. As the sun rises on a new day, Tucker's dog keeps watch, but instead of barking, he lets out a sheep's bleat, hinting that some traces of the infection still remain.